During your PhD and after your PhD, there are some things that you get a first-hand experience of that other people just don't get. And in this video, I want to share with you what PhDs end up understanding by the end of their PhD that most people miss out on if you don't do a PhD. The first one is that IQ is completely overrated. Now, the thing is that when people think about that person who's doing a PhD, they're like, oh, they must be clever, they must be the top of their class. Yes, they may be all those things, but IQ is completely overrated when it comes to completing a PhD or doing something for a long-term, like a research project. Now, the things that really matter, and you come to understand this, is determination, is actually that it's not like the aha moments where you're sat in your office and you're like, oh, I've had this magical idea. Yes, those happen, but it's the grunt work. It's the fact that you need to sit down and do things for a long period of time. The human brain was never meant to do this. It is all about just focusing on the task at hand and not giving up. You may have that moment where you go, I want to try this amazing idea, but in fact, it's not going to actually sort of like come to fruition for many months or maybe a couple of years. And that is what a PhD is all about. So yes, you can be clever. PhD students quite often are very clever, but it is completely overrated when it comes to doing a PhD. In fact, I reckon people, instead of thinking that person is very clever when they do a PhD, they should be like, wow, that person really knows how to focus and work. This video is brought to you by my newsletter. Go check it out at andrewstapleton.com.au/newsletter. I'll put a link in the description. When you sign up, you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks. Everything from the tools I use, how to write the perfect abstract, links to the podcasts I've been on, and more. It's exclusive content only available on that newsletter, so go check it out. After doing a PhD, what you come to learn is that the true value of a PhD is not in the contribution to the field. Now, some people say that papers are useless, that they don't get read, and to be honest with you, there's some truth to that, which is why it hurts a little bit. You know, papers that are produced in journals that are peer-reviewed very rarely get read by the appropriate people at the right time. And so really the true value of doing a PhD is the fact you've learned how to learn, is the ability to take a complex subject and break it down into actionable steps to learn new things. That's where the true value comes from. The ability to learn something new about the world on your own terms, under your own self-motivation, is the true value of a PhD. It's the learning process that you get exposed to, that you become so sort of like emotionally attached to, that really is the true value of a PhD. And your thesis that will probably not get read again. My parents only read the introduction, and I don't even think that actually. I think they read the dedication, where I dedicated my PhD thesis to them, and then went, oh, it got a little bit too technical for us after that, so no one reads your thesis. And also, no one really reads your papers unless, you know, you publish it in a really high impact factor journal and you're one of the 0.00001% of scientists that have a genuine breakthrough. So, yeah, that's the true value. Doing a PhD is all about going out on your own, doing new things, and part of that is understanding how a project evolves when you have no end in sight. Now, a lot of the things that we do, even in university, if you go to university, there is a system in place to make sure that you pass. You are part of that system. You sit this exam, you study these things, boom, you've got yourself a degree. A PhD is completely not like that. You end up entering something that you don't know will work, and then you have no end. And it's that evolution of a project that I think no one else really gets. And a lot of the stuff, you know, in jobs is all systemized. We've got to a point now where you become part of a system. It's an extension of that kind of undergraduate feeling. But with a PhD, you are genuinely entering the unknown and you get a true sense of what a project feels like. So it goes something like this. First of all, you start off in your first year and you're like, oh, I am going to make some amazing discoveries with my amazing brain, and this is going to be easy, and I'm going to have those aha moments, and everyone's going to be like, you're amazing amazing and I'm going to go to conferences. And it kind of starts off that way, and you start sort of like building up those early stage foundations of knowledge, and you're like, oh, this is great. And then about in the end of the sort of first year, second year, maybe even the beginning of the third year, you start going, oh, this is difficult. This is much harder than I thought it was going to be. Okay, let's just work on it. And you work and you continue, but you end up sort of like going down the other side where you're like, I'm never going to be able to do this. This is impossible. Why did I even decide to do this? What am I doing with my life? Why didn't I just go and do a trade and become an electrician or something? And then after about another year, you start coming out the other side. This valley of death consumes you. And you come out the other side and you're like, okay, I'm starting to get a handle of this. And then you come out the other end and you never kind of reach where you thought you would, but you go, okay, I learned a lot from this. Let's finish it up and move on. And you end up sort of like finishing, not where you thought you would when you first started, but somewhere just underneath. But you've learned a lot along the way. You've survived the valley of death. And that is really what people don't understand about doing a PhD. And I think that gives you the ability to weather a lot more in the real world afterwards when you've completed your PhD. University, to me, used to look like a weird place where there were very clever people doing very clever stuff. But what you realize once you get exposed to PhD supervisors and the PhD process and academia in general is that pretty much all of these very high-level professors are in survival mode. They are surviving just on grants, this money, that collaboration. They are working their asses off. And it's not something, at least for me, that appealed to me once I realized that that was the direction I was heading in. These people are sleep deprived, they're sort of pulled in multiple directions, they're contributing to the university, they have to publicly now talk about their research and produce real world impact. I don't know why I'm doing this a lot today. And then they have to supervise students, then they have to do teaching, then they have to manage whole courses. Like, that is insane. So what you understand about these people is, yes, they're clever, yes, they've got to the top of this academic ladder, but my God, they are very, very stressed and in survival mode. And that is something that PhDs get an intricate kind of window into the life of a PhD graduate and academic and supervisor. And some people go, this isn't for me. Another thing I think PhDs just get that other people don't get is they get to train themselves in long-term rewards versus short-term benefits. Now, throughout the lifetime of a PhD, you will be tempted to procrastinate a lot. And maybe in the early days, maybe even in the middle, you will. But you learn eventually that holding back on surfing the internet for hours, then holding back on going out or going early or going to that meeting or going to the university's pub or whatever it is, that won't make your PhD successful. So you start to train yourself to look for long-term rewards rather than the short-term fixes. And it's something that I think I've noticed, since starting businesses and having my startup, is that I kind of understand a lot more about not doing that short-term gratification, but rather worrying about where I'd be in a year's time, 2 years' time, if I kind of like set myself back in tiny little ways now. And it certainly is something that you get an intricate feeling for once you start to panic, to be honest. Once you go, oh God, this needs to be done in a year's time and I've wasted all this time doing all this other stuff, you start to train yourself to think long term. And I think that is something that a lot of people really get from their PhD that others miss out on. One of the last things that I think you get as a PhD student is you start to understand when enough is enough. Like, the whole world revolves around unfinished work. Capitalism, everything means that there is always more work to do. And I think with a PhD, you will never finish a PhD project. There is only ever points where it makes it sensible to leave it, to round off a story and move on to that next challenge in life. And I think once you understand that, you set out and you think, I'm going to solve this problem, It's never solved. You can always improve on your solution to a problem, especially with the way technology advances and how everyone kind of raises the level of knowledge throughout your PhD. And you kind of understand that there is a point where you do have to just step back and go, well, I've made my contribution. This is as much as I want to do within this given time frame, because you can extend a PhD to a lifetime, which is essentially what an academic job is. And then you need to go, okay, this is good enough. I've got enough to sort of like get past the academic hurdle of getting a PhD, and now it's time to move on. And I think most people don't have that general insight into sort of feeling like there's much more to do, but knowing that there's a now is a good time to stop. And that's what a PhD helps you kind of just understand. So there we have it. There are all of the things that PhD students get that most people do not get. Let me know in the comments what you would add. And also go check out academiainsider.com. That's my project where I have my ebook, The Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as my Insider Forum. All right, I'll see you over there and see you in the next video as well.